Hey y'all, welcome to episode 3 of Long Live the ABB, conversation from the crossroads of Southern music history and culture. Episode 3 features David Goldflies. David played bass in the Allman Brothers from 1979 to 1982. He also was Dickey's bassist from 1977 through 1983 with Betts Hall Leavell Trucks. Here's part 2 of our conversation, recording Enlightened Rogues and touring with the Allman Brothers Band and working with the great producer Tom Dowd.
So you have this great, you have this reunion, you decide to go back to it, and then you go record Enlightened Rogues. And there's a couple things I want to talk about that. One is it seemed like a pretty cool time for the band. There was a real, I was reading the Rolling Stone piece that they did when you guys first released the record. A couple other things. Seemed to be a very harmonious time. The other thing I want to talk to you about is songwriting. You got a songwriting credit.
A hopeful time. I believe that's a hopeful time.
That's a good way to put it. Talk a little bit about that, because you don't know what's coming. I mean, nobody knows what's coming when they're sitting there. And remind me again, how old are you in 78, 79?
Well, I was born in 56. So if I got in 77 with Dickey, I was just 19, and then I immediately turned 20. Then the next I have my birthday's on August 13th. And so a year later, then the band reformed, so I turned 20 years old, 19, 20, turned 21. I was 21 when that happened.
Man. So you're there with you're there with these killers, records you listen to and things like that. You get a chance to write with Dickey a pretty good little boogie blues song.
I'll try it one more time.
Try it one more time.
It's more of a funk than a boogie.
Okay, I'll go with that.
It was the first time like a popping and slapping bass sound had been in Allman Brothers songs, to my knowledge. But that they've got recorded and released, whatever. But that actually came from Dickey heard what I was playing and he liked it, and then it came from there. But how did I get what I played? It goes back to that what I mentioned earlier. I worked with a guy named Bill Bartlett who had a band called Starstruck, and Starstruck. This is when I was 18. And Bill found me playing in Oxford, Ohio, playing in a little drug-induced college band. I think I was still in high school, because there's a really guy with a big personality played basketball on campus. Oxford is a university town. Ron Tuffle played basketball, and he's a big man on campus, and he would sing and play harmonica, but the band would sell pot to get the PA and stuff. But they kept me out of it because at the time when I first started, I was in
underage,
which was cool. So I ended up playing 2 gigs with him, and Bill Bartlett saw me at one. He said, "You're a good bass player, man. Come play in my band." He had lost his bass player. They had a fight. Sensing a theme here. And Bill took me in a little studio locally, but then we went to the Cleveland Recording Company and recorded a song called Black Betty. And Black Betty became a regional hit first, and then the band broke up. And that was the part where I was depressed and lonely and no work and no girlfriend and no money. It's this sucks, Because the band had been doing great, man. We've been having fun and partying. This is a great life. Party slammed into the wall. It just stopped. And so now and then I played in that top 40 band, got with Dickey, the rest is history. Well, Bill had a song called Right on the Money. And Right on the Money had a line like, bo-doo-ba, bo-doo-ba-da, doo-doo-ba. He had a line. It was different than the one that made it in Try It One More Time. But I was just jacking around with, they're called sixths musically.
Yep.
It's like the interval of the sixth, right? And in blues, they're used a lot. They're used a lot everywhere, but in blues, they're used. And I was playing this thing, and Dickey kind of dug. He said, "What is that?" I said, "This little line." Didn't tell him about Bill's part. And it wasn't the same line. It was just a variation. And he said, "Oh, we can use that." So we did. And then I did this little groove thing, and then it became Try It One More Time.
So he built the lines around
off of that groove, basically.
Bass part. Wow, I love it. Yeah. And I was listening to the song when you sang it. Is your bass line, so is that a 3-part harmony on that intro, or is that just the 2 guitars and your bass line is doing something else in that song?
I'd have to listen to it.
Okay.
It could easily, I'm sure they're kind of doubling it. But it could be 2 parts harmonies above it, or it could be 1 part doubling. I'd have to listen to it. I don't really know.
But are you playing that same part that you wrote, or did you write a separate bass line for
during that part, I think we're all playing that part. I think we're all playing that line.
Yeah, you're definitely
unison in harmony, if that makes sense. We're all playing the same figure in harmony. And then the bass line, boom, boom, whatever it is,
Well, and then and then somehow they make the decision to split vocals, which does not happen very often in
Yeah, they did.
Allman
Yeah, they
Brothers
did.
at all.
I don't know how it happened, but they did decide to do that. Yeah.
It's a groovy song. All right, now let's talk about arranging a little bit. So
I guess it's
go
prophetic
ahead.
though, because why don't we give it one more time and try it one more time? Maybe that was the whole idea of the band, right? You know?
I mean, David, I'm going to say, like, when I listened to it in, let's say, 93, 94, the first time, the album, I was like, yeah, that fits. Let's try it one more time. All right, so let's talk about Pegasus. And whatever you remember on it. So, I'm always curious about Dickey as a songwriter. When you deconstruct an album like I did on Fillmore East and think about it, Pegasus, I think, is like Dickey's lost instrumental. It's a beautiful song. It flows really well. It was nominated for Grammy. It was their first Grammy nomination. It feels like a winged horse flying across the sky, which I'm assuming is what Dickey was shooting for. But how does Dickey Betts bring a song to like that to y'all? What do you remember about it? Maybe it's a better way to say it. Like, I
specifically don't remember much, but I can tell you that it seemed like what I do remember, it all came out of Dickey. It wasn't like, we all played stuff. And I since learned that Dickey kind of liked to have a foot in the Latin type of world. That's where my bass line doom, but da doom. It's more Latin feeling. Doom, but da ba 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 da 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 da. They like that. Elizabeth Reed is a little bit like that too, honestly.
Yes, it is.
It can be played extremely Latin. We don't have to, but he has that little bit of vibe in him too. But I mean, when he came in with that line, da 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 da, it's all off beats. That all from where I sat, that all came from Dickey. It wasn't a lot of input and back and forth. That line, ba da da boo da ba da boo da, Dickey, pure Dickey. I mean, that just came from Dickey. Now, to be honest, I'm sure Danny Toller had a little bit of an influence with him, because that's more of a fusion sounding line, ba da 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 da, moving down force like that. But it was slower and it just was real nice. I'm just trying to think of anything else I can remember about it. Not really. It just seemed like it all came out of Dickey.
Does Dickey did he like I'm imagining he didn't write the bass part. He surely wrote the guitar parts, but does he say, like, this is what I want you to sound like? Is that kind of how you evolve a bass line on it? Did he give you a lot of input?
He probably gave me some input just to say, hey, the basic grooves like this, and then do what you do with it. Sometimes I would talk to Butch about the grooves and stuff, like what to do in certain situations. And I'd play some stuff, keep it a little more solid. Play a little more, Butch was easy to work with on the drums and the bass parts. It wasn't real explicit. The band wasn't very explicit about stuff. A lot of it was just, doesn't feel good, but
that's why, when we spoke at the H&H at GABA last year for a little bit, and I had a comment to you very quickly to say, like, I was thinking about you after seeing you play and meeting you. And I mean, I'm a fan, I going to admit, but I was like, man, that guy had nothing to do with the bad decisions the band made in 1980, 81, and 82. Like, you did your role.
Or the good decisions.
Good point.
I wasn't in the decision-making seat. I mean,
well, I'll say this though. I'll say this though. I could
not trying to duck responsibility. I just wasn't in that seat, man.
Well, one of their good decisions that has always been, for the most part, except for the tail end of the time you were in the band, was hiring the right players and letting them do their thing. And what I'm hearing you say is that's pretty much what happened from the minute Dickey found you.
Well, yeah, and also, if you had any questions, if I had questions, I would ask. I mean, that's why it felt disingenuous when Greg's like, Rook plays too much. All he had, let's face it, it's Greg Allman versus David Goldflies. Who's going to win that? I think Greg Allman. That would be my thought. I mean, all he'd have to say is, hey, man, tone it back a little bit. Yes, Greg. Never got that, man. I just never got it. So I would have been more than glad to be whatever they needed. It's their band. I mean, it was their band. I was in the band, but it was, they had the artistic musical vision and the control.
Right.
And the control. Now, conversely, from that one comment, Dickey was always on me to, like you said, rattle the strings, play more. Barry was active. He was melodic. He was contrapuntal. And he played hard with a pick. And that's what I had to do. That's what Dickey wanted. And so if you got one guy wanting you to lay back and one guy wanting you to play more, but I never got the lay back message.
Right. One guy wants you to lay back, but he never told you shit. So you're stuck doing that.
Maybe in the studio once, hey man, lay back a little bit, which I'm sure I did. I mean, like on the Enlightened Rogues album, one of the best things in my life and one of the best things about that album was working with Tom Dowd. I didn't realize at the time that I was working with Tom Dowd. He's just Tom Dowd.
Right.
Which history, I mean, I should have known because he was Tom Dowd then, right? But I'm just a kid. What do I know? And Tom told me, hey, man, clean it up in the studio a little bit. A lot of those things you're doing live don't matter, but here they matter. And it is almost not a night when I'm playing with my band, A Brothers Revival. Well, I don't think about how I'm playing and Tom's advice. And am I just making a bunch of rattling ass noise here? Am I playing like really good shit, you know? And I
That's
mean, Tom's
awesome.
advice, it was a small comment, but it's a huge comment by a guy who was one of the quintessential producers of the 20th century, you know, for sure. It's a nice to have.
And a comment that could have destroyed your confidence if delivered wrong. You know, it could have had the exact opposite effect on you or any musician, right? Like saying, hey, play different among these killers. And you could be like, oh, okay. You know, but instead it was and I've heard this about him. He was a genius at that.
Yeah. Well, it worked or didn't work with me, but cleaned me up a little bit, which probably needed to happen. But as I practice violin now and I practice upright bass and I play in orchestras, it's all about, you only want the sounds that you want to be, that were written for the piece. You don't want any other sounds. You know, you don't want, you know, you're not looking for your interpretation of Beethoven. Just play the sound and play it with the group around you musically. I have a lot of friends, we discuss this a lot now, but at the time on an electric bass, needed to hear it. And I hope I cleaned it up enough.
Yeah, I mean, proof's in the pudding. It's a gold album. It's a fantastic album that has, you know, I think stands the test of time. It sounds like
good
1979. All right, let's talk. Can we move over? I want to talk about being a bass player in the Allman Brothers Band. I want to talk about two drummers that play completely differently, as I understand. And as I have heard, both Woody and O'Teal at first struggled to find their footing, you know, between live, on stage, everything else, to be the bass players they were. Did you have the same? Did you have a struggle finding a mix?
I don't recall that. I don't recall that at all. I just don't recall I was struggling between JMO and Butch. And for me, the reason was when I would stand on stage and there'd be Dickey and there'd be Butch and there'd be me. And then I look over there and there'd be Danny and there'd be JMO and there'd be Greg. And sometimes I'd get a chance to walk over there while we're playing. And it was like a completely different band. It's like, wow, this is kind of cool. I didn't know this was even going on. And then I walk back over the side with Butch and, oh, this is a different band. It was a much more of a rock band on my side of the stage. On the other side, Danny had a lot more like jazz and jazz fusion, so his lines would be a little more syncopated, I guess. Dickey did syncopation too. He did it in a different way. JMO, couldn't tell you what he's going to do, man. Totally unpredictable. I mean, I'm sure some nights he was brilliant. Some nights he might have been asleep. I could not tell you what he was going to do next. And that's the beauty of JMO in some ways, you know, in many ways. And I've seen old video of him, great player, and he did wild things over there with wild instruments I've never even seen. But as far as influence my bass line was to play with Dickey, how I got the gig, back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And Butch was just a solid rock, just right on just beating it, man. So just play with that guy. And that's how I solved it, you know, and it seemed to work good enough for a while.
And you didn't do any, like, you didn't go back and like listen to Barry or Lamar, no study or anything like that. You just dove in.
If I couldn't figure out what really they needed, I'm sure I listened some, but I think my ears have gotten better. My analytical skills have gotten better over the years. As I wrote music for my band called the Allman Goldflies Band with a fellow who just passed away, Gary Allman. And I had to do all the arranging. And so we did do some Allman Brothers stuff. I went back and listened, like, oh, that's a little better. So and then I arranged for my own band and wrote stuff down. So my analytical skills improved over time. I didn't have those skills back then. I had a good ear, but and I read music, but it really wasn't. I didn't start reading bass clef till I was about 49 or 50 years old. I wasn't good at bass clef. For playing bass, you think that'd be a necessary item.
Well, especially when it's done as much as you have with it. So
I read it okay. I read it okay, man, but it wasn't like, you know how you read a book, you know, like just this is words, right? Bass clef to me is not like reading words. Back then it was struggle. Oh, that note. Oh, that note.
Yeah. I struggle reading music, period, for that reason. It's just like, I just cannot translate the dots and the lines.
Oh no, man, it's like reading words, man. It's the simplest thing in the world. I knew how to read treble clef because I played violin before I played bass. So treble clef, even now, is fairly simplistic depending on what they write. But bass clef was a challenge, but now I'm playing at 2 symphonies right now. They're not world-class symphonies, but they'll challenge you, keep you honest. I
You
call it keep you honest.
you became like you went from being a young buck just doing your thing to on the biggest stage. You didn't sound like have a heck of a lot of time to get your bearings. You just had to, like you said, just get thrown in and start playing.
Yeah.
You listening back now. All right, I wanted to read a quote. I looked you up. I looked you up in my research, which is extensive. And Goldflies is not a super common name, so that's really easy
No.
if I can look up that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about bass playing, and I wanted to get this line in. This is a review from June of 1979, where you're listed, and it says bassist David Goldflies held most of the music together. Which I think is a neat thing to get thrown in. This is a band of bass killers. I mean, all 5 of y'all are incredible
Oh, yeah.
bassists.
Everybody played well. Beautiful.
What did you see as the role of the bass? I mean, and maybe you've answered this a little bit, but with Dickey, with Butch, of course, and how the band worked, but that the bass is such a foundational part of the movement and of the sound of that band. Any thoughts on how you approach it, and any thoughts on how you approach it as you've looked at how the other ones have over the years?
I have a couple thoughts. One is how I got to be in a situation to begin with, which matters, because in my family there was, like I said, I played violin, and we always had to practice before dinner, and it wasn't negotiable. And so, I hated it when I was a kid, but it definitely put a culture of practicing in my mind. And as I got older, and my dad got me started on bass, I wanted to play guitar, but he said, no, everybody plays guitar, play bass. There's not that many good bass players. At that time, there weren't that many. Now there's a bunch of good bass players. And so I started playing bass, so I practiced it. But the philosophy I had a very musical family, my grandfather, my father, me. The philosophy was to be prepared, show up prepared to the gig. Just if there's going to be a certain piece of music, study it. If it has a certain pop tune, be familiar with it. And for a bass player, that means know the progression, know the feel, and make sure your equipment works. I mean, it goes down to some really basic stuff. Hey, you got a spare wire, man, And so it wasn't about making it big. I meet a lot of young musicians, man, we're going to make it, man. Never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind. Just be prepared. Play music, be prepared. And so when I got to play with Bill Bartlett's band, Starstruck, he taught me all about blues and rock and that intensity and how to play at a pretty high level. Bill was a hell of a guitar player, and it had other hit records, like a song called the Green Tambourine by the Lemon Pipers. That was Bill. That's Bill Bartlett. Yeah, Bill was an acid rocker too. It was just like Spinal Tap, man, where they had what was it called? The Spinal Tap. It had that song, "Listen to What the Flower People Say." Their first hit, right? Remember that?
Yeah, they went their psychedelic.
That's how the Lemon Pipers is to Bill Bartlett. That's what Green Tambourine is to Lemon. They were an acid rock band. If you go back and listen to like old Lemon Pipers albums, it's like an Echoplex gone berserk, man. It was like acid rock to the bone. But they had a hit with the Green Tambourine. But Bill taught me how to be like playing like Going Down, Black Betty. I mean, just hard rockin', bluesy, Southern sound and stuff. He was a great guitar player, man.